Perfect. Thanks a million, Michael. Michael said, yeah, my name is Oisín Duffy. I'm the Surveys and Records Officer with the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And this evening, I'm going to be giving an introduction to butterflies and moths and some of the species that you're likely to find in and around Cloncrow Bog. But I suppose before we get into the fun of butterflies and moths, the National Biodiversity Data Centre, who are we and what do we do? So we're the centre that works to make biodiversity data and information more freely available in order to better understand and assist with the protection of Ireland's biodiversity. So the old line used to go that we were the National Centre for the collection, management, analysis and dissemination of data on Ireland's biological diversity. I suppose when you break that down, really, the collection is the data that we actually collect in from citizen scientists like yourself and other kind of governmental bodies and other professional ecologists. The collation then is what we do when the data comes in, preparing that data for the validation process. We're collecting all the data from all the different sources. The management goes through everything from the storage, that's kind of the technical side of stuff, also to the management as in like the validation side of things as well. The analysis side of things would really come from the likes of the monitoring schemes, seeing where species are maybe dropping off, seeing where species are actually increasing in their ranges and things like that. And then the dissemination of the data would be through our different, through our mapping portal, biodiversity maps. And I suppose it's worth pointing out as well that we're also part of GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. We're a national node for that, so all the data that's collected in Ireland goes on to the GBIF as well. So I suppose we have two kind of core pieces of infrastructure for data collection and data mapping. And that first one is on data collection, and that's the Ireland Citizen Science Portal. So I see there's a few names that I recognize for receiving records throughout the years there. So a lot of people will be already familiar with this. But for anyone that's not, this is the national portal, and it has for collection of biological data. And we do that through a suite of dedicated online recording forms. So whether it's you're interested in butterflies, moths, vascular plants, birds, there's recording forms there for different taxonomic groups. There's also recording forms there for specific surveys. So we do partner up on surveys, things like the Irish Hedgehog Survey or the Irish Stoat Survey as well. So those are both hosted on the Citizen Science portal as well. The records can be submitted through the desktop web portal version. So that's what you would use on your kind of laptop or your desktop computer, or the actual biodiversity data capture app, which is available on Android and iOS. And just to kind of give a sense of scale for this, sometimes biological recording can sound very niche, but in 2022 alone, there was over 171,000 records submitted through Ireland Citizen Science portal. So there's plenty of people and plenty of records coming in. So once the records go through, they come through the portal, they come into us, where there's active validation. Those will be sent on to either the validator in-house or to like a national expert, and they'll go through, make sure that they can verify and validate that all the information is correct within the actual record itself. Once that's gone through that process, it'll be loaded up onto Biodiversity Maps, which is our national kind of mapping portal. And it's not just citizen science records that are on there, but also records from, as I mentioned before, government bodies and different professional ecologists as well. So I suppose it's just kind of important to note that there is, technically two databases there. There's a citizen science portal, which acts as an unvalidated database, and that's useful if you want to see just what's kind of coming in there and then on a regular basis. And then biodiversity maps is where you would go where you want to find out exactly the distribution of species and what records are considered correct. There can be a slight time discrepancy between submitting the record and then the biodiversity maps. As you can imagine, those 171,000 records, they are checked by a person at the end of the other side of the computer. So it can take a wee bit of time to get through a vast quantity of records. So the data is made freely available to everyone to view online and can be used by recorders, academics, and policymakers. And a good deal of the actual data sets and everything on there as well are open source as well, so they can be downloaded freely as well. So we run a whole host of different monitoring schemes and recording initiatives. They kind of range in levels from complete beginners all the way up to experts. There's recording initiatives for different taxonomic groups. So regardless of your interest, you're likely to find something that'll be of interest to you. And then there's also recorded initiatives that'll take place across different habitats as well. So no matter where you're based, you're likely to be able to get involved somehow. So how to get involved? The very first step generally for people is to get involved through casual recording. So it involves recording and submitting records with no set parameters, and you can record what you like when you like. So it's kind of very free and easy. When you're out in the walk, you're taking a note, maybe just some of the species that you see, or potentially you're just seeing things that are maybe a bit unusual to you. That's basically what the casual recording is. Now the thing about it is that casual recording might sound like, well, you're only going to be picking up the very common and widespread stuff, but sometimes some of the best finds that you can get are done by casual recording. It's the ones that you nearly trip over when you're out for a walk somewhere. So it can include everything from common and widespread species all the way to rare and protected species. And this can, a lot of times what we notice is that people will submit one record and then they actually won't submit any others. So one of the things we noticed from the data is that about just over half of all recorders that submit data and throughout the year will only submit the one record. So this is obviously a record that they've thought that, it's of a significance to them, at least. So maybe it's, seeing something like Irish hare, maybe it's, seeing badger or fox down the back of the garden, and it's the one time that they see it. It's we would assume it's generally those kind of situations. So some recorders then, once they kind of get bitten by the bug for it, really will start making lists for their local areas, sometimes by taxonomic groups. So you'll have people that just record birds, you'll have people that just record plants, and you'll have people that start kind of branching off into various different groups, so you'll have people that start off with those and then slowly migrate towards lots of different other groups like butterflies and moths and dragonflies, damselflies, and things like that. So the number of species recorded is generally dependent on both the habitat and then the recorder skill level. So if you're out and about and you're not getting too many species, don't worry, because it could just be kind of habitat based as well. And then some recorders will actually employ different methods of looking for particular species. It's still quite, it's still kind of casual, but some recorders will start doing things like sweep net and their tray beating, and that brings the kind of the general biological recording to a next level. It is kind of that bit of a step up. They put some kind of structure on it that you're obviously searching for a particular type of species. So how to get involved then? Well, the different taxonomic groups, that's a great way to start. There's obviously there's a ton of different taxonomic groups, and what I mean by that is you have things like birds, vascular plants, butterflies, and moths, and those are some of the larger ones that we would kind of notice the records coming in for. That and then terrestrial mammals. So it is generally good to kind of pick off on one of those first, just to kind of get your eye in for the certain species that you're going to be seeing locally. And a lot of times it's not even knowing every single thing that's growing in your locality. Sometimes it's just enough to know what's different to you. Because if you're living near a woodland area or you're living near kind of an urban area, you're going to be getting different species than if you go out to the coastal areas, or if you're going to like a bogland. So again, what you can see from the most popular and heavily recorded groups from last year, it might be a surprise in a sense for some people that the moths, maybe the people that are here tonight aren't too surprised that moths are in there in the most heavily recorded group, but a lot of people are generally surprised that moths are kind of up there. And I suppose that's because Ireland has quite a kind of a vibrant and very kind of hard working moth recording network in Moths Ireland. So I suppose it's no shock to us. It's one of the larger groups all the time, and it's one of the larger data sets that's actually on biodiversity maps as well. So I suppose when you're looking at casual recording and you're looking at getting involved in different schemes, we're talking that there's levels from kind of beginner all the way to experts. And I suppose when you're looking at the beginner level kind of stuff, you do have projects like the Spring Flowers project, which is running at the minute, which is looking for records of 20 different species of spring flowers that are generally kind of relatively common and widespread and relatively easily identifiable. With that, then you also have projects like the Backyard Biodiversity, which again is choosing about 20 species as well, and looking for records of those particular ones that could be kind of found around backyardings or in your local area. And then I suppose on the other side of it, then you have things like the butterfly and bumblebee monitoring schemes. I suppose the butterfly monitoring scheme is probably the most prevalent one to talk about tonight, since we're talking about butterflies and moths. And really what it involves is that walking a fixed route known as a transect every week from April to September. Now, I suppose every week from April to September can be very difficult to do, not only for just, even if you have all the time in the world to do it, getting the conditions right, get them where the temperatures are good enough and there's not too strong of a wind and all those kind of things, so you have optimal conditions week in, week out. But for people that can't do the 20 for the main transect, there's also a 5-visit monitoring scheme as well, and there's also a garden butterfly monitoring scheme. So there is kind of, I suppose, different levels there for people who have different time constraints and different kind of levels of activity and mobility as well, I suppose. I suppose taking part in something like the butterfly monitoring scheme, we'd always encourage people to start, doing casual recording first, start to get to know what's in your own area, start getting your eye in for all the species that you're likely to come across. There's about 35 for butterflies in Ireland, so you don't need to know all 35 to start. Sometimes you'll be lucky if you're going out and you're getting 10 species maybe on your transect walk if it's not a particularly kind of rich area. And then I suppose the other thing is that it's important just to know what you don't have as well. So there's a few species that unless you're in the burden, you're probably not going to be coming across too regularly. But as I said, once you kind of got your eye in for it and you think that you have the time commitment for it, it's a great way of kind of putting a structure on it. And monitoring schemes really are that gold standard for biological recording. And what we mean by that is that they allow for the same person to be carrying out the same walk week in, week out. I suppose it means there's no kind of recorder bias. There's no different skill levels between the recorder. You're the same person going out there every week. Conditions are nearly, kind of roughly the same, and it's the same area that you're walking through. So it's fairly standardized throughout the year. And again, there is different ways of getting help online as well. We do have ID help and guides. There's Butterfly Swatch, so that's like a small little pocket identification guide. There's online learning courses for the butterfly monitoring scheme, and there's also online posters and presentations and the like as well. So introduction to butterflies, let's actually get into the good stuff now. There's about 35 species of butterfly in Ireland. There is a red list for butterflies, which kind of monitored all the regular migrant and naturally occurring species as well. And they were assessed, and that's basically when you hear species is vulnerable or you hear species is near threatened or of least concern, that's what those red lists do. They kind of go out to see what way these species are faring. So as I suppose everyone knows, butterflies are active during the daytime, usually in good weather, although there's a few species that will kind of tough it out in some overcast weather and even small showers. And when recording butterflies, it can be very useful to catch individuals with a net to get a better look at the identifying features. Generally, this is done if you have a small pot and a small bit of toilet paper in it, just fold it over. It means the butterfly's not going too mad in there and kind of losing too many of the scales when they're battering around. And then after some practice, you'll kind of get into what species are in your area, and you'll be able to just maybe find them nectaring on a flower, and you'll be able to kind of see the features there rather than having to capture them every time. And sometimes you'll even get to the point where you can just do it when they're passing on the wing. You'll know by maybe the type of flight, the overall size, and what's normal for your area as well. So I suppose just before we get into the actual species, just to kind of say these weren't chosen at random or anything like that. What I've done is I've chosen species that are quite commonly recorded or most heavily recorded through the Citizen Science Portal, and also those which have been found in or around Cloncrow Bog. So it's not just a top 10 of the most heavily recorded. There are species as well that are specifically on this list because they're found in the Cloncrow area. And so the first two up there are speckled wood and small tortoiseshell. So speckled wood, it's a kind of a medium size of a butterfly, brown butterfly, those little kind of eye spots all along the outer margins of the wings. The cream blotches, they can kind of range from a very kind of pale straw color all the way to a deeper yellow color. And they're often found basking on bramble and in bracken, kind of soaking up the sunlight along woodland edges and laneways. I always think of them as the bouncers of the butterfly world because they will see off anything that comes into their territory at all. They don't really take kindly to anything coming near them. So if it's hoverflies, bees, wasps, it doesn't really matter. Speckled woods will always kind of show them off the premises without too much fear. And then small tortoiseshell is another one that's one of our most commonly recorded species year on year. And again, it's another one of these ones it's kind of another medium-sized species, alternating black and yellow bands on the front forewing. It has this necklace of deep blue spots along the upper wing and along the hind wing as well. And it has a contrast very light and dark mottlin on the hind wing, and the underside of the wings altogether it could be kind of mistaken for a leaf. And this is generally one of the species that, when you say to people, when someone says they found a butterfly in their house during the wintertime, this is generally the species that people are talking about. It's often found around the kind of the rolls and curtains and things like that. When people are putting on the heating, or if they're lighting a fire, the temperatures get up a little bit, and the small tortoise shell kind of wakes up thinking that springtime again, and the heating goes off and they go back down and they kind of settle back in to try and overwinter again. So they overwinter as an adult. So that's the one that you're most likely to find coming into the house at that time. And you can see from the bottom here, these distribution maps, these show the actual areas that they're found across the country, and you can see that both of these are filling out the map of Ireland fairly well. They're probably two of the most commonly recorded species that we have. So onto the next two, brimstone. So it's a large butterfly. It can be mistaken. Some people can often mistake it for something like a large white, but it does have those angled tips to the fore and hind wing, which will differentiate it from that. And generally the color as well is a bit more of a kind of a yellowy greeny color. And this is said to be the butterfly that we actually get the name butterfly from. So it's supposedly the color of butter. And again, you'll see that it mainly follows its larval food plant, the alder buckthorn. And again, it's found generally, it's kind of a more of a midland species. It's certainly a species I would associate with the Midlands, and kind of all the way into the Burren and that as well. And again, it's a very, very distinctive species when you do see it. It said those characteristic kind of tips to the wings as well are very easy to see once it's settled, but once it's in flight, it can be a bit of a different story. Peacock then is another large butterfly, and it has those really kind of distinctive iridescent eye spots both on the forewing and the hind wing. And the thought behind this is that it was to deter predators. So it's sitting there on the grass, predators about to approach, and it can flash open these eyes, and it obviously appears much bigger than what it actually is. Again, this is another one of these species where the undersides are very dark without kind of any bright markings. It can very easily pass if it's sitting kind of in late coming into late in the summer, and it's sitting on something you could mix it for a bit of a dead vegetation. It blends in very, very well. And again, you can see from the distribution map, the brimstone is kind of following those areas where its larval food plant is found, and then the peacock is covering nearly virtually. There's only a handful of squares there that aren't really covered by it. And again, the peacock is one of these species that you'll find coming into your garden. If particularly around kind of things like budlias and stuff like that, you will kind of get them congregating there. But it can be found obviously in the wider countryside as well. So on to the brown species, and these are ones that people, when they're starting out, can have a bit of a difficulty with, and particularly even when you've been at it for a while and you see them starting to fly around, these species can give people a little bit of difficulty. So again, they're both found pretty much throughout the country, and they're both medium-sized butterflies. So with the meadow brown first, it has this kind of two-toned brown coloration on the underside of the wing, or the hind wing, and it doesn't have any of the eye spots. A lot of people take this kind of coloration for almost like a tea bag kind of coloration, a dried in kind of a tea bag that's been left on the sink for too long, has that dried in color. Generally, it has one apical eye spots. That's this part up here, and then the kind of the patch of orange on the underside of the forewing as well. Now, on occasion, strangely enough and confusingly enough, you can come across meadow browns that actually do have two eye spots, which can sometimes make you think that it's something like the gatekeeper. But again, taking in the other features that are there as well, it's more than likely going to be meadow brown. And again, it's found virtually throughout the country. And then when comparing that to the ringlet doesn't have any of that orange coloration, and it has these series of kind of haloed eye spots as well that are all along the underside of the forewing and hind wing. And it's more of a dark brown kind of in color, kind of a chocolatey brown. It can range from what you see there, almost sometimes it nearly appears to the point of nearly looking black sometimes. Particularly fresh individuals can look extremely dark at certain times of the year. And again, it's worth saying that species like peacock and small tortoiseshell, that they're using things like nettles as their larval food plant, and the browns generally, as a general rule of thumb, are using different species of grasses as their larval food plant. So back on some of the white species now, we have the wood whites and the green vein white. So the wood white, for this for the purpose of this talk, we're just going to be grouping them together. So there's technically two species of wood white in Ireland. There's one that's kind of confined to the Burn, and then one that's found basically everywhere else but the Burn, effectively. The species can only reliably be differentiated by dissection. So therefore it's kind of safer just to record them as the aggregate, or as a species in the field. So they have a very delicate appearance, kind of it looks like a very weak flight. There's just above, kind of hovering off the ground. A lot of times it looks like they're just kind of running on fumes, effectively. One of the things that makes them a little bit different from the other white species is they're very rounded wings compared to the slightly more angled wing of something like the green vein white. And there's no real bold markings on it as such either. And you can see that the white with gray wingtips, you can see the kind of the gray mottlin in here as well. And again, one of the interesting things about wood white are that they do a kind of a courtship ritual. So if you are lucky enough to see both of them pairing up, the males generally will be kind of dancing the antennae on either side of the female. And if you wait around long enough, you'll get to see whether they paired up, or whether the female thinks better of the dance moves of the male. The green vein white is one of the most commonly recorded species. It also causes a lot of difficulty, particularly when starting out recording butterflies. It's extremely common, and the markings can change, particularly from the first brood that are out to the second brood. Generally, the second brood are that little bit more distinctive and have a little bit more kind of a yellowing on the undersides of the wings as well. But generally, what people will always kind of state with the green vein white is that even from the top and the bottom, they have this kind of striped appearance. So these are one of the species that you would recommend to kind of capturing in the net a few times, putting into the pot, taking a good look at it, making sure you're happy with what it is, just to make sure that you're confident in identification. And or alternatively, if you're not in for kind of capturing them and potting them, just waiting until they settle. But it can take some time to get some of these butterflies to settle. And again, getting a photo of them does help with the validation process as well. And again, both of these, the green vein would be a kind of a medium-sized species, and the wood white would be kind of virgin, coming into the smaller of the whites. So two others for the list as well then are common blue. So there's three species of blue butterfly in Ireland. You have the holly blue, which is currently in flight now. That's quite generally a high flyer and uses holly and ivy as its larval food plants. Then you have the small blue, which is kind of associated with kind of very kind of like grassland areas and also coastal dune areas. It's not a species that you're probably going to wander onto. They're extremely tiny, and you generally have to go looking for them. And then common blue, which will be out a bit later in the season. It's a very distinctive species. It's a true kind of blue coloration. The underside of the wing has a lovely kind of necklace on the edge of the wings of deep orange. The males and the females can look slightly different, with the females having a more brown coloration on the top along with that orange as well. They are quite small, and they are found throughout much of the country, but there are certain pockets where they're not found. For myself, back in East Donegal, there's a good bit of a pocket there where they're just not there, no matter how much birds for trefoil that you have around. That's the larval food plant for it as well. And I suppose jumping in size from something like the common blue all the way up to one of the larger butterflies, the red admiral. So this is it's a regular migrant species. It's found all throughout the country. It's quite a large size, and has these broad and red and white bands on the upper side of the wings. It's a very distinctive species as well. Just kind of it has a very kind of large, powerful flight. But it is the kind of thing, if when you see it in flight, the difference between it and say something like the peacock can be difficult to actually nail down unless you see the top side of the wings. So it is one of these ones it's good to kind of let it settle as well. And it does often settle kind of not too far away from you on the path. So if you have a decent zoom function on your camera, that's always worth taking a shot of that. So on to some of the more kind of bogland associated species. We have the marsh fritillary. It's the only species of insect in Ireland that's protected under the Habitats Directive. It's a fairly kind of a medium sized. It has an orange and cream panel pattern on the upper side of the wings. It has prominent broad orange band and at the margin of the upper side of the hind wings, and black dots at the center of each of the square patches. Then it uses the devil's butt scabious as its larval food plant, and it's you'll kind of see the caterpillars of the Marsh fritillary, small black kind of jagged looking little fellas around the base of those, and people will go out and survey for those in particular as well. So again, you can see from the distribution map, it's a relatively widespread species, but it's not everywhere you're going to find it. You're generally kind of looking for the species whenever you are when you come across it. And it is worth noting as well that the species was listed as vulnerable in the red list that was done for butterflies. And again, this is a species that you be keeping an eye out for when you're in that kind of, when you're seeing a lot of the succiser, the devil's butt scabious, in a wet grassland coming into bogland areas. This is the kind of areas that you be keeping an eye out for this particular species. Large heath. This is one of the rare species that we have in Ireland. For in the terms of butterflies, you can see the distribution of it. It's relatively widespread, but it's very localized generally, and it's quite different to the small heath. So it has these irregular white streaks on the underside of the underwing, and it has 2 to 6 distinct ringed eye spots on the underside of the hind wing. So that's one of the core identification features for that. And again, this is one of these species it is labeled as vulnerable in the Irish Red List for butterflies, and it isn't one of these species that you're probably going to come across by accident. It is probably one of these ones that you're staking out in areas to try and find it. And the food plant for this is the hare's tail cotton grass. So that's similar to the common cotton grass, but has that more kind of a V-shaped flowering head. And then 2 others that are associated, and I think both found on Clonmacnoise bog as well, are the green hairstreak and the dingy skipper. So both of these are small butterflies. Green hairstreak, there's nothing else quite like the green hairstreak. It nearly always just has the wings closed up. They show that kind of beautiful green iridescence. It is proper like a bright emerald color. And again, it is found around kind of bogland, and particularly around the edges of it as well. You'll find it kind of sometimes on, congregating around gorse as well. The dingy skipper is probably our most moth-like species of butterfly in Ireland, along with the other skippers. But you could be mistaken. You could be forgiven for mistaking that it's actually a butterfly. And it is this dark gray brown mottled coloration, and it has these distinctly clubbed antennae. And I suppose the flight of the actual butterfly itself is this kind of like skipping flight, where it just seems like it's just trailing off the ground and settling, then trailing off the ground and settling again. So I suppose that's really it for the butterflies. A bit of a crash course of what you could be finding around Clonmacnoise, and then just kind of in general as well, what you'd be finding along maybe the edges of habitats as well for some of the more generalists. So moving on to the moths, moving on from the 35 species of butterfly, you're moving up to moth then, which have about 1,500 species of moths. So that they're generally broken up into macro and micro. And generally, as the name suggests, the macro moths are the larger and the micro moths are the smaller ones. But there are exceptions to it. Something like the small magpie is considered a micro moth, even though it's larger than some of the macro moths. There is a red list for macro moths as well, in which 501 species were assessed from a total of 578 of the macro ones. While moths are generally more active at nighttime, there are a number of species of distinctive day-flying species as well. So the ones that would you come into your head with that would be the likes of the cinnabar and the 6-spot burnet and species like that. Moth recording is generally carried out with a moth trap. There are other methods involved, but the moth trap usually involves a light source. So the moth is attracted into the light. It kind of will hover around there for a few seconds, and then kind of batters off the light and goes down into a funnel, and down into, generally it's egg cartons that people use as the kind of the substrate inside for the moths to kind of dig themselves down into and have a bit of a kip for the night then. And again, one of the things with moth trapping, I suppose, is that you generally you kind of want to like having an early shout in the morning with it, because generally a lot of the species will become active by the time, if you leave it too late, they'll become active and start flying out of the trap. Or once you open the lid off your trap, they're they all go. It might look quite nice, but you're probably losing nearly all of your catch. And it can also be, you know, it doesn't take too long before birds will get wise to where you're doing your moth trapping as well. So that's another thing to consider. It is worth mentioning as well that moth trapping does require a license to carry out. And if anyone needs any more information on that, we can discuss that a little bit further. So again, it's a very kind of similar process. The moth species chosen for this are ones that have been either recorded in Cloncrow Bog or that have been you know, heavily recorded through the Citizen Science portal. And there's one or two species in there as well that have been added just to kind of show the diversity of moths that we have. And I know for a lot of people here tonight, you're probably already preaching to the converted, but just for anyone that has that kind of preconception that maybe moths are kind of these gray brown things that are battering into the window or battering around your light bulb at night. So the first one up is the peppered moth. So it's a relatively kind of handsome and large size moth, relatively common widespread species. And it is also as well quite a variable species. The mottlin, or I suppose what you consider the pepperin, different between different individuals. And there's also all black individuals present also. This was the moth that was used for the example of industrial pollution as well, because the ones that had the more of the mottlin on it were getting picked off more than the ones that were completely black and blending them with the soot on walls and fence posts and things. And you can see from the distribution, a lot of these species, they're quite widespread. I suppose that's one of the ideas with citizen science and biological recording, is that just because a species, just because the distribution of a species doesn't cover a certain area, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not there. A lot of this comes down to recorder effort as well. So it's a case that there may not be suitable habitat in an area, the species just might not occur, or it could be that there isn't anyone there that's actually recording for these particular type of species. So if you do see a blank near your own local area, maybe it'll incentivize some people to take up moth trapping. So then we have the brimstone moth. So this isn't to be confused with the brimstone butterfly. She had the same name, but two totally different species. It's a relatively common widespread species, and it's one of the more kind of distinctive ones when you're starting out with moth trapping. It has a distinctive yellow coloration, and it has these kind of reddish brown streaks kind of going along the forewing. And this was the little eye spots as well near the top. Again, there's nothing really to be confused with this particular species, and it is a relatively common and widespread one, and they'll come to the trap in good numbers. Hebrew character is probably one of the more commonly recorded species, and it is probably one of the more I suppose characteristic. What people, if you ask people to draw a moth, this is the kind of thing that they would probably go for. It is quite dull. It doesn't have there's nothing too flashy about it. It's a common widespread species found throughout a range of different habitats, and it does have this distinctive Hebrew character, kind of a Gothic script marking on it. And again, they'll come to the moth trap in good numbers also. To the right then is definitely what people wouldn't generally think of when they think of moths, and this is the popular hawk moth. So these are really these are really kind of charismatic species. They're very large, they're very strong, and they just kind of look very, very distinctive. So they're, I guess, a very large species, but they are relatively common and widespread. These are the kind of things that are flying around us all the time, and unless you're out trapping, or unless you're out looking with a torch, you're probably not seeing it. It's distinctive solely just due to the large size and shape, and as the name suggests, the larvae use a series of different poplars and willows as well as their overall food plant. And you can see from the distribution map in Ireland that they are quite well covered throughout the country. And again, those squares where it's not there, again, it could be to do with that there's not suitable habitat, or it could be to do with that there's no one actually recording moths in those particular areas. So again, we have a kind of a split here between the white ermine and the brown silver line. The white ermine is this kind of I think people usually compare it to like a Cruella de Vil type kind of fur coat. It has this very kind of hairy, fluffy looking head and thorax, and this kind of great looking ermine-like white cloak for the wings, that are dappled with black spots. So this is a very common and widespread species as well. You can see through the distribution map at the bottom there, it is quite a common and widespread one. I usually get that it's one of the more common species that would be coming to the traps whenever I would have been doing them. And again, there's a few species that you could mix it up with, things like the muslin moth, things like buff ermine, but again, it's if there's plenty of groups online and the lads in Moths Ireland as well will gladly help people out if they're stuck between a couple of species as well. Brown silverline then is another species that was found in Cloncrow Bog, and again there's a good amount of records that come in through the Citizen Science portal as well. It's a relatively common widespread species. It's kind of small to medium in size. It could be very, very easily you could miss it very easily as well, but generally a lot of the records that come in for this species are when it's disturbed during the daytime. So you'll often see it kind of hanging around on bracken or on tall vegetation. It gets disturbed and then it settles in kind of it settles in longer vegetation kind of near the base, trying to, I suppose, evade any mothers that are looking for more records. And again, it's quite a, I suppose it's probably one of the, compared to something like the white ermine, it might be slightly duller, but once you kind of get up properly and get a look at them, it's actually quite a handsome species as well. So here too, that they're adding in just to show, I suppose, the kind of diversity and just kind of how vibrant some of these species of moths can be. So you have the elephant hawk moth, which is a large and very, very distinctive species, generally due to the large size and the color, this kind of green and pink coloration. They're again relatively common and widespread. It's one of these things, when you look at them, you'd imagine that they're very rare because you've never seen them. But again, these are the kind of things that are potentially flying around your house at night, and it just needs a light source and a bit of moth trapping to actually see what's around. The large emerald is another one. Again, one of the things with the large emerald is that while they will sometimes come to light, they generally don't go into the trap. So you searching around the area that you've been trapping is quite a good idea for something like the large emerald. And it's a large species. It's relatively common. And it's relatively widespread, but kind of locally common. And it has a large, distinctive green wings with these kind of broken white lines along the center. And again, the one shown above there, that's exactly where the species was, probably about 10-20 feet away from where the trap was placed, hanging on vegetation. So it does pay to look around the trap as well and look around the surrounding vegetation just to see, because some of the moths are ideal for blending in with the natural environment. So again, these are another two species. Angled shades is one of these ones. It's a relatively large species. It's common and widespread. It has these distinctive, heavily scalloped forewings, and it can be often found. Generally, I find this species nearly more during the daytime, resting on things like walls or vegetations or fence posts, and it's just kind of you'll just see it hanging out there. Obviously, wait until it's night again to get moving. And then on the right hand side is probably one of the least, I suppose, moth-like species that when you think of moths comes into your head, and that's the white plume moth. So there's a series of plume moths that have this kind of T shape. So the body's here with the wings out on either side, and they're quite feathered wings. It's a relatively widespread species. You can see it's found throughout most of the country, but it's probably kind of more localized than some of the others. And again, it is quite tiny as well. And there's many species. There's other plume moth species that are quite similar, but the white plume moth is probably the most distinctive of the whole lot. So on to some of the species then for the bogland side of things. Dark tussock, that's the species that is found in Cloncrow Bog, and you can see from the distribution map that it's not exactly a species that's terribly widespread or common. The species is most actively recorded in June, July, and the caterpillar is thought to use heather, Colluna vulgaris, as the larval food plant. The caterpillar itself is quite an attractive specimen with those kind of multiple tufts of hair coming along the back. It might look familiar to some of you out there as well. It's kind of similarly related to the pale tussock, which has that really distinctive kind of lime green caterpillar with the yellow tufts of hair as well. So again, that's a really nice species to be able to find, to be able to say it's found in Cloncrow Bog, and it mainly does kind of follow the raised bog habitat in the Midlands and then around Lough Neagh also. So latticed heath then is a relatively small to medium species of dayfly moth, which can be found around bog and heathland. As the name suggests, it has this kind of lattice-like appearance, so it's kind of like a deep brown and kind of like a creamy white coloration. And again, this is something you'll kind of see flitting by yourself when you're on boglands. And clovers and other trefoils like birdfoot trefoil, so anything in the pea family, like those, are used as the larval food plant. And then probably one of the most distinctive species, and one that I think that everyone would be delighted to see, is the emperor moth. And again, this is another one that you'll find around kind of bogs and heaths. And I'd say a lot of people probably find the caterpillars with us as often as they actually find the as they find the adults. So it's a large species of moth. It's widespread and can be locally common. The males are more brown in color, while the females are more consistent kind of silver and gray. The males are flying during the day, while the females are more active at night then. And then the caterpillar is very large and has these kind of black hoops in between the sections of green, with these yellowish spots and kind of covered in hairs. And you'll find this when you're kind of out looking for plants, and you'll just see it, because it stands out like a sore thumb against all the rest of the vegetation. And you can see from the distribution map that it is, while it says locally common there, it is still quite a widespread species. So that's probably one of the most distinctive ones that you'd have with these kind of great big eye spots. So I suppose if you're, that's kind of, I suppose that's it really for the moth side of things, for the ones that are found in Cloncrow and the ones that we're seeing coming into the Citizen Science portal. What happens now? You're out, you're looking, you find a moth, you find butterflies. How do you get involved? So once you went out there and actually started looking, and once you're happy with the identification, again, there's multiple ways of getting kind of help with that. There's some great groups on Facebook now as well. There's the Insect and Inverts of Ireland page, and there's also the Moths Ireland group. They're fantastic for getting identification help with butterflies and moths. And again, there's yourselves as well. If you have anything in particular, especially on the side of butterflies, we're more than happy to help with the identification. So we have this kind of notion of biological recording of the 4 W's, and that's the core information that's required for a biological record. So that's the who, when, where, and what. And in this case, the who is your name and your email address. The when is the date that you made the observation. The where is the location name, county, and then the spatial reference as well. So the spatial reference is gained by interacting with the map of Ireland on the desktop version of the Citizen Science portal, and it then is also automatically generated if you're using the biodiversity mobile app. So you don't have to worry about GPSs or anything like that. The what then is probably the most important thing. That's the actual species name itself. And again, we would always just say to people, make sure you're happy with it before submitting the record is probably quite an important thing. And again, just to reiterate as well, that moth trapping, the light trapping does require a license. And that's something that you could get in contact with NPWS or Moths Ireland about if you're serious about getting involved. So further resources, we have a whole bunch of resources ourselves. We have the Swatch series, as I mentioned before, so those the fan-like identification guides that are actually pocket-sized. And we have ID booklets as well for some of the other groups. So there's the grass guide, and there's the guide on bats, and then there's project-specific resources as well. So things like spotter sheets that we've made for the Spring Flourish projects, and we're making other kind of small identification guides and presentations as well that'll be available on the learning platforms. I suppose as well, it's worth saying as well that the recorder network, that's how we get the vast majority of records through the Citizen Science portal. We have a very large and active recording network. Since the records began, there's been submissions from over 30,000 different individuals. And as I mentioned, in 2022, there was over 171,000 records from almost 7,000 individuals. And I think probably one of the most interesting things about that is that from this kind of small cohort, there was 43 recorders that submitted over 1,000 records. So that's a phenomenal level of recording. And some of those people that are submitting over 1,000 records are submitting multiples of thousands of records. So it's a huge, first of all, time, the time that it actually takes to go out there. Then the expertise that it takes to record across such a vast number of species and to submit records. And then lastly as well, to actually sit down at the end of an evening when you've done that and actually submit all your records. Sometimes that can be the most difficult part to actually motivate yourself to do. So the recorder network includes members at all different skill levels, from complete beginners to professional ecologists and even national and international experts. And you'll find that people are very free with their time and their knowledge as well to actually help if you do have any questions. And the best thing about it is that anyone can become part of the Record network. All you have to do is get out there and start submitting your signs. And I suppose with that, I'm conscious of the fact that generally you get the most out of these events by the question section. So if people do have questions, more than happy to answer them.
Brilliant. Oisín, thanks very much. That was really good, really informative, and yeah, I think I'll have to watch that back probably several times before I head out. But that was really great. Eugene has a question there, and he asked, do moth records submitted to Moths Ireland make it to the National Biodiversity Data Centre?
Yeah, so we have a partnership with Moths Ireland. So all the records that are submitted through our portal go to Moths Ireland for validation, and then they'll come back to us to be hosted on biodiversity maps, and vice versa. Any of the records that are sent to them, they'll get updated then and we put on biodiversity maps as well. So now we have a great working relationship with the people over in Moths Ireland, and they validate all of our data. So I would say if you do have any questions on moth identification, they're the folks to go for.
That's good to know. And Ger has a question. Is there a particular forum for the Recorders Network?
There's not one set of it. There's not any kind of particular web forum or anything like that. I suppose there would be kind of recorder outings, or there'd be workshops throughout the years where the Recorder Network would kind of, you know, have a chance to kind of meet up as such, but there's no formalized web forum or anything like that for it as such.
You mentioned, I think, a couple of Facebook groups there as well, Moth Ireland and Insect and Invertebrate group. Is that the one? And there's a question from Albert then. Is the data on moths showing any trends around loss or gain?
Well, I suppose probably one of the best things for that really would be, I suppose, when you're looking at casual recording, or if you're looking at people that are carrying out maybe recording on a long-term basis, I suppose you might not necessarily be able to find that kind of information out as such, just from the kind of the distribution maps. The Moths Ireland would probably be the best place to answer the data on kind of losses or gains, but also the red list that I mentioned is available for both the butterflies and the macro moths. So it will kind of give you an indication of the species that are being found. I suppose one of the things I mentioned at the start about moths being a very kind of heavily recorded group is that sometimes, you know, things can appear better or worse depending on the level of recording activity as well. But I suppose when there's 1,500 species as well, it can be hard to, you'd have to take particular species. You'd have to take particular species that you want to find the kind of the trends on, I suppose, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense.
And thanks, Oisín. And it was just a follow-up question there from Ger about how do you sign up for those outings? So I presume that's both the various workshops and trips that you mentioned.
Yeah, so there's two main ways to, like, I mean, I would advise anyone to sign up for the mailing list. That can be done on the front page of our home webpage, biodiversityireland.ie. It's up at the top right hand corner. But there's also a section on our webpage for workshops or events, and you can see the list of various workshops that are up that are upcoming, and that'll kind of be updated throughout the year as new ones get added as well. So you can see what ones are available, and you can see what ones are close to you as well, because understand that's, you know, it's not always feasible for people to travel 2 or 3 hours for a workshop as well. So it's worth checking. It is worth checking to see if there's anything close by as well.
Yeah, indeed. And just to say as well, I suppose a lot of the groups of the Community Wetlands Forum regularly have events as well, so you can keep an eye on our own website. There is just I suppose a comment just saying that it was a wonderful run through, and that the National Biodiversity Data Centre, when you submit a recording, it's also a great way of keeping track of your own records, dates and varieties as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're noticing as well. In particular, like it's great as have for the Citizen Science Portal is great as a way of using it for your own personal database effectively. And one of the things that we're also noticing is that community groups and kind of different localized groups are coming together. They're saying we want to submit data effectively as almost like a team. How can we do it? And we would always suggest them, if you have one central email address, you can all use your own names, but use one central email address, submit all the records, and then effectively you have your own personal data space for a community area. And you can then see, kind of what areas are, biodiversity hotspots in your local area. And then you can maybe kind of get involved with things like the Community Foundation for Ireland, where there's an ability to, get involved with an ecologist that will come out and help you work on biodiversity audits and biodiversity action plans, things like that. So there's lots of there's lots of great resources on there. There's tons of great resources on the maps and the portal if you dig around a bit. Like the reason I knew that there were species that were found in Cloncrow was because there's a report function on the biodiversity maps. Otherwise you'd be kind of hitting in the dark, or you'd be kind of searching around. You can actually just go in there, put your 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer or user defined polygon, and just extract all the records for that area and see what's there. So there's definitely a lot of good information on there. Just dig around a wee bit.
I yeah, I suppose we maybe have time for one more question if there is any more, if you want to put it in the chat. But just a few people kind of coming in with their thanks, which I would add to as well. Oisín, it was great presentation, really really informative, and it's amazing. Like, I mean, I'm no citizen scientist, but I suppose I'm becoming newer to it, and I know your talk a few weeks ago certainly inspired me to go out with a field guide out to my local woodland. So I think this has provided more inspiration to myself and to others as well. So just I just see two last questions, so we might just take those and then before we close. So a question: what advice would you give to attract more butterflies or moths into the garden?
Okay, so with attracting butterflies and moths into the garden, first of all, I'll say our colleagues, we have a all Ireland pollinator plan. So if you're looking for kind of information on what to plant or what to do, they have guides that are built up on this with all the best practice and all the information there. I would say one of the things is that people can generally jump in and say that they're wanting, I suppose, what you consider sources for nectar for the butterflies and moths. But what's very important as well is to remember that if you're wanting butterflies and moths to come into your area, you're not just wanting the adults, you're wanting the larvae and that as well, the caterpillars actually come in. You're wanting suitable habitat and suitable plants there that the adults can actually use to lay their eggs, and that the caterpillars can actually emerge and they have the actual food source there. So a lot of times kind of letting a bit of an area grow a bit wild, not cutting as regularly, can allow different species to pop up. As I mentioned, a lot of the brown butterflies, they'll use different species of grasses. Something like the orange tip uses cuckoo flower, and you'll be seeing the small orange eggs on the kind of the developing seed pods and those just behind the flowers over the next few weeks as well. So I would say there's species that you can definitely get in there just that are a great nectar source. But it's good to kind of keep a more kind of a holistic approach or a wider approach on that, to remember that having things like bird's foot trefoil, that's you'll get butterflies nectar on that, but you'll also get stuff like the common blue, which may choose to lay its eggs on that as well. So it's important to kind of have that approach, that you're considering not just the nectar sources but also the larval food plants as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then just the last question then from Eugene. Would you like to comment on the importance of moth larvae for bird food?
Oh well, yeah, I suppose, yeah, that's it. We're talking about recording in them, and we're talking about them with their kind of, I suppose, when you're looking at species like this, you're talking about they have their own inherent value by the fact that they're there and they're naturally occurring in that. But again, we're not looking at anything kind of in just to shine the spotlight on something. They're part of a food system, they're part of a food web, and they're part of an overall habitat and ecosystem. So yeah, again, butterflies and moths, caterpillars are hugely important in that regard for a whole host of other species. Obviously birds. The other thing is that you will get figures as well that will say the, caterpillars being parasitized by different species, and people generally think that is negative, but it could be a case that that's it's a biological control to make sure that there's not too many caterpillars out there, so that there's there's none of the larval food plant left or it gets stripped too early. And you hear figures up to 70% of caterpillars can be parasitized with any one year. So it can be quite an extensive number. And again, these are things that are going on all around us as well, and they're happening kind of on a very, very small scale, like species that are probably half the size of your thumbnail that are going around making these changes in the habitat. But yeah, again, they're completely they're further down the food chain than a lot of things. So yeah, they're obviously a very vital, important source of food for birds and other animals.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Oisín, thanks very much for your talk and for answering the questions this evening. Really appreciate your time, and just to say thanks again to everyone who made it along this evening.